Welcome to another episode of the Omics Casts. My name is Alberto Viledi, and today I'm going to talk about longevity and family size heritability. And the motivation to talk about longevity and family size heritability and its relation to GWAS studies is from a tweet by Omer Weisbrot um, recently on "Are longevity and family size heritable?" And then he says, check out our new paper that answers these questions using historical pedigree records with millions of individuals. And so the paper that he mentions is a PLOS journal where they look at the technical side of things, the code and data for these analysis that they did. And it refers to a previous paper, a follow-up of a paper in 2018 in Science magazine, where they looked at the estimation of heritability for longevity in pedigree data. So this is the title of the paper in Science magazine, Quantitative Analysis of Population Scale Family Trees with Millions of Relatives. The first author, Joanna Kaplanis, and the last author, Yaniv Erlich. Joanna Kaplanis is currently a PhD student at the Wellcome Tara Sanger Institute in Cambridge, and Yaniv Erlich is Chief Scientific Officer at MyHeritage, and he holds a professorship at Columbia University in the city of New York. And so this paper, Quantitative Analysis of Population Scale Family Trees with Millions of Relatives, is a paper about family or genealogy information that is available online. The paper, the abstract says, family trees have vast applications in fields as diverse as genetics, anthropology, and economics. But collecting this family tree information has so far been quite tedious. And here they show a very successful story on being able to collect 86 million profiles from publicly available online data shared by genealogy enthusiasts. And then in the second part, they look at this data to partition the genetic architecture of human longevity and to provide insights into the geographical dispersion of families. So what did they do in the paper? They constructed and validated population scale family trees. They leveraged the genealogy-driven social media data to construct population scale family trees. They used the Geni.com crowdsourcing website to obtain and download approximately 86 million publicly available profiles, and then they use these for scientific analysis. So these are people that go to a website and they basically record what they know about their family tree. Then these data about name, profile, birth date, death date, the place where they lived, can be cleaned up and then aggregated to produce these very large pedigrees that can be analyzed programmatically in a computer program. Where is the data coming from? Well, as you can see here in this plot, most of it is European and American, North American, and Canadian, but there are also pockets of information in the rest of the American continent, parts of Africa, the subcontinent of India, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So it's quite a complete data set, quite a complete worldwide data set, even though it's got a huge underrepresentation in some parts of the world. What you can study from it are things like this heat map, which is very interesting, which shows you the age of death over time from the present down going back to the 1600s. And as you can see in this plot, most of the people these days, they live until they are 75, 80, 85 years old, maybe 90 sometimes. But back in time, that wasn't the case. And there were a lot more people living only in their 60s or 40s. And there's always been a proportion of the population that has not reached the age of 5 or 10. Most of the population these days survives the first 20, 25 years of age, and then they go on to live, in many cases, up to 80 or 90 years old. And you can see also in this plot these three marks here, which coincide with increase in death rates, and they correspond to the Civil War in the US, the First World War, and the Second World War. And so if you plot this differently, year of death by expected age of death, you can see these two drops of expected age longevity in the First and Second World Wars, and also a mark in the American Civil War. And so all this can be gathered, simply surmised from all this information that people put online on their genealogy trees of their families, and it makes for quite an interesting data set to analyze. So what did they do to associate the information, the pedigrees, to things that we already know, have some estimates, such as the heritability of longevity? Well, they came up with a statistical method that they call sparse Cholesky factorization linear mixed models, shortened into psi-LMM. So they applied this statistical methodology psi-LMM to estimate the additive and epistatic components of longevity. What they find out is that they say, taken together, our results across multiple study designs indicate that the limited ability of GWAS studies so far to associate variance with longevity cannot be attributed to statistical epistasis, right? And they say, on the basis of a larger number of data points and study designs, we measured an additive component of about 16%. That is considerably smaller than the 25% figure that is generally cited in the literature, right? And so they say, using this data set that is different in many ways to previous data sets that have been analyzed, and trying to estimate how much longevity is heritable, they have to lower the prediction from a 25% figure that was quoted in many papers beforehand to a 16% figure based on the additive component. And as such, they said, we should lower our expectations about our ability to predict longevity from genomic data and presumably to identify causal genetic variants, right? And so this is a bit of a downer, basically saying, by looking at some more data about what we know about the age at which people die, from 86 million profiles of pedigree data, we now have to lower our estimates of how much genomic data is going to be able to tell us about longevity, and presumably lower our expectations on being able to identify causal genetic variants of longevity. So that's one of the important results of this paper. Here they plot this in a plot that it's got adjusted longevity correlation in percentage with IBD identity by descent. Essentially, if people marry with relatively close family members, their identity by descent goes up. And so the genetic identity goes up. For example, for identical twins, the genetic identity is practically 1, but it goes down if you marry and have children with people that you are completely unrelated back in time, right? And so here they plot this and they basically extrapolate to the 1.0 IBD for the Danish twin studies, how much of this adjusts correlates with adjusted longevity, right? So it's a way of saying what the different components are and how much we expect longevity to be heritable. Something else that they were able to do in this study is to look at the median distance of marital distances, essentially. How distant were the people that got married from where they were born, each other in the couple, right? And they looked at this over time, and essentially the median distance in kilometers stayed quite stably up to 10 kilometers to each other for quite a long period of time, right? And so the person that you married for a long period of time was born about 10 kilometers near to where you were married. And so this has an effect on the identity by descent of your children. But with the second industrial revolution in the 1900s, turn of century, then it went up by almost a factor of 10 or even more, right? So most of them had a median distance of about 100 kilometers or more. And that coincided with the drop in identity by descent of the individuals that were born, right? So relatively stable for about 200 to 300 years, 250 years, and then in the 1900s, a massive drop of identity by descent. And so they say before the Industrial Revolution, earlier than 1750, most marriages occurred between people born only 10 kilometers from each other. And then they say after the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution, 1870, the marital radius rapidly increased and reached about 100 kilometers for most marriages, right? And they say that for the first 200 years, the average IBD was relatively stable and on the order of 4 cousins, whereas IBD exhibited a rapid decrease after that point in time. Overall, the median marital radius showed a strong correlation with the expected IBD. And then this says it happened in different phases in time. And they say that marriages usually occur about 20 to 25 years after birth. And around this time, they say in between the 1820s and 1875, rapid transportation changes took place, such as the advent of the railroad travel in most of Europe and the United States. They say, however, the increase in marital distance was significantly coupled with an increase in genetic relatedness, contrary to the isolation by distance theory. They say only for the cohorts born after 1850 did the data match the theoretical model for isolation by distance. So they say, taken together, this data shows a 50-year lag between the advent of increased family dispersion and the decline of genetic relatedness between the couples, right? So there was a 50-year lag between the family dispersion, families being able to, the couple meet up, even though they were married, maybe they were born 100 kilometers apart one to the other, and then see the steady decline of genetic relatedness between couples, right? So Omer talks about some caveats of this analysis, which is the teasing of genetics apart from environment associative mating is tough. And they saw this in the paper with IBD and the marital distance. And then they use some heuristics in the paper, like excluding the close family members, spouses with similar death dates, etc. But there's still lots to be done, and suggestions welcome, right? So a little bit of a summary of what this paper is about. Anyway, I found it a very interesting paper to talk about, especially this detailed analysis on how IBD dropped at around the 1850, 1900 in the history of humanity. I hope you also found it interesting. And if so, I hope that you follow the next episodes of the Omics Cast. And until then, goodbye.